But let's move on to Logan here and talk about the final movie in this trilogy of films. Logan was early in its development, pretty much after the release of the Wolverine. They knew they wanted to make another one. 20th Century Fox initiated discussions over another solo film starring Wolverine, and they wanted James Mangold to come back and work on the film in addition to producing with Laura Schuler Donner. And in December of 2013, Hugh Jackman had spoke about possibly nearing the end of his tenure as the character, but he also stated that the movie was still in the very early stages of development. He also revealed that Mangold had begun speaking of potential ideas, and he added, quote, Jim Mangold and I were literally on the phone last night talking about ideas, but there's no script and no writer, so it's way off, end quote. And James Mangold would later reveal that Hugh Jackman was very involved in developing the story. He said, quote, Hugh and I have been friends for almost 20 years now, and he was there every step of the way. For Hugh and I, the first goal was to construct something more intimate. Hugh often brought up The Wrestler and Unforgiven as examples. I used those references as well as others. I pitched to both Hugh and the studio that I had an idea for an extremely bloody, existential Little Miss Sunshine.
I love that description
in
so
quotes.
much. I love that.
And I think that's pretty much what the movie turned out to be. That's very, very accurate. They were going to go in a drastically different direction once again with Logan. This was going to be a completely distinctively different film than what we even just saw with the Wolverine. Of course, there's certainly traces of similar DNA, but this is going into a more apocalyptic, Western outlaw, very small, very intimate character study about Logan pretty much at the end of his life. That's really what the story is ultimately about. They scaled it back so dramatically. Even the budget for the movie is like almost double less than what the Wolverine was. I think the budget for the film is like 97 million. They had been making these movies for 150 million and 132 million, but 97 under 100 million dollars. It's pretty crazy. And ultimately this became, I think, quickly known that this might be the last time we see Hugh Jackman in this role, because prior to the confirmation of the movie and the title, he initially denied that he was going to step away. He said that he was inspired to return to the role because of what Michael Keaton did in the movie Birdman, which sort of resurrected his career in the mid-2010s, and he ultimately wished to portray the character of Wolverine until his death. But turns out that wasn't necessarily true, because in July of 2015, he posted an image to social media of Logan giving the middle finger with the claw, and the image also had the hashtag one last time, and that basically signified that this was going to be his last appearance as the character. What do you recall about this in the development and the lead up to the movie? What do you recall about this sort of announcement that this would indeed, at least for that time being, would be the last time we would see this character, who had already been portraying him for the better part of 15, 16, 17 years at that point, especially considering we hadn't really had, I think, a proper send-off really for any comic book superhero in live action before this. What do you recall about just those moments in those early days?
I just remember being like, it's time. We spoke about earlier how, this character, he had been playing this character for so long at this point already, and been so involved in so many movies that I think a send-off at this time, I thought a send-off made sense. Like I'm looking out for Hugh Jackman. In my mind, like, this dude has to be tired, bro. Like, he has to be. But also, I remember being like, this could also help fuel the movie. Like, there's kind of two things happening at once. You know what I'm saying? Logan is going to be older. Hugh Jackman is also going to be older and has been playing this role for a long time. These two things can definitely mesh. And so I remember kind of being in some ways excited for that, excited for a proper send-off, excited for what potential they had to say, okay, y'all, this is really legit. Hugh Jackman's last time playing this. Let's not necessarily take it as a funeral, right? We will see later on, but as a celebration of what Logan is and who he could be and who he was. And so I just remember being excited for that. Like, man, I am a little sad, right? Because he means so much to so many of us. And that's our Wolverine. That's who we had seen for so long, but it's about that time. And I'm sure Hugh Jackman is tired of playing this character. So I was fine with it. And I remember being like, I remember being fine with it. And I just remember hoping, just make it good and I'm good. So, yeah.
We were in nearly unprecedented territory when it came to this announcement, because, as I said, in superhero live action films, there hadn't really been a proper send off for all of the characters that we saw. Christopher Reeve as Superman, he did 4 movies, but they were planning a 5th. But the
Mm-hmm.
4th one was so terrible that he didn't come back, and ultimately he wouldn't portray the character again because he got ill. Michael Keaton
Mm-hmm.
never got a proper send off. He just didn't return after Batman Returns after Tim Burton said, "I'm good." Even Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi, they were planning a 4th Spider-Man. They just didn't make it. Really, kind of the only send off that we had gotten until
Dark
this
Knight
point,
Rises.
Dark Knight Rises, Chris Nolan
That's the closest thing, I think.
and
Yeah.
Christian Bale. That was really the only one that we had gotten. But even to that end, he had only been portraying that character for 8 years. Let's
Exactly.
double that with Hugh Jackman, who's been doing it for
Exactly.
17 now. So we have even more stake, more longevity, more of a connection to him, more appearances, just flat out in the amount of films that he was in. And so when you look at it from that perspective, that we hadn't really done this before in this medium, and the fact that he had been doing it for so long, this was earned. This was absolutely
Mm-hmm.
earned. And when the announcement was made, it was like, yeah, you know what? I'm so good with that. Like, you have done more work as this character than a lot of your peers have ever done, and everything wasn't necessarily great. But again, as I said at the top of the episode, you always gave 120%. You always had the commitment to the character, and you were never the issue. You showed up every single day and just made us believe that you were this character through and through. He had done
Mm-hmm.
3 X-Men movies. He had already done 2 Wolverine films. He popped up in X-Men First Class. He was in Days of Future Past. It was like, yeah, how many times can one person play a character? How many times can they
Mm-hmm.
just come back and try to do something different every single time? Because there's really only so far you can go before you've sort of tapped into all the major elements and major aspects that make him who he is. And so when they made this announcement, yes, it was a bit somber, but it was also, I think, to what you just said earlier, it was a bit exciting because that gives even further motivation for him to know, like, oh, they have to knock it out of the park. Because I don't think that up until that point we had truly gotten a movie that just universally was loved by
Right.
everybody, that got everybody to say, like, yeah, that's a great Wolverine movie. And that's what they set out to do with this film. And thankfully it did turn out that way. But Jackman talked about his decision to step away. He had an interview with Willem Dafoe on the Variety Studio Actors on Actors, and he said that he actually had Jerry Seinfeld convince him to quit the role during a dinner that they had together. Basically, Hugh Jackman had asked Jerry Seinfeld, why did you end Seinfeld? Why did you end the show? And Seinfeld replied and said, quote, "I've always believed you should never spend everything creatively because it's almost Herculean to start it up again. You should always have something in the take," end quote. And basically, Jackman took that and summarized that you should leave the party before it gets too kind of late. That's the theory. And he's actually living that right now, which is kind of crazy. He left, in essence, on top with Logan, and now he's returning back to it 7 years later in Deadpool and Wolverine. And this is after a ton of convincing that happens on the part of Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds has been campaigning for Hugh Jackman to come back for years and years. Pretty much as soon as he announced it, he's like, "Yeah, you should come back and do this." But Jackman always just shot him down and always said, like, "No, we're gonna leave it where it is now." But now, knowing the legacy of Logan is established and it's done, and they nailed the send off. They truly stuck the landing there. And to examine it in the context of him returning in Deadpool and Wolverine, how do you think
Mm-hmm.
about that? How do you sort of reckon with that he does come back now, and we will see him at least one more time, and maybe in future multiple appearances potentially in the MCU as they continue to move things forward?
Yeah, it's something I haven't completely reckoned with yet, but I have been thinking about for sure. You know what I mean? Like, of course, we'll see him in Deadpool and Wolverine, but I think my true answer would probably come after seeing that film. Like, oh, what's happening here? Because what if, I don't know, what if they do talk about Logan in some capacity in that movie, or what if they do say, oh, what's going on here? But there is also a bit of, I guess, like, what there's still part of me of like, what if Hugh Jackman can help save the current state of the MCU? You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe that's also as important as that send off was. And it is weird though, because the send off was so good. It's such a, oh my god, it's such a good send
It's
off. It's like,
perfect.
it's literally perfect. It's like, are we opening up this can of worms for real? Part of me does want to say that, but then another part of me is like, you could fit over here too, though. Like, we haven't really gotten a true Deadpool and Wolverine. We hadn't gotten Hugh Jackman in the blue and the yellow outfit yet. You know what I'm saying? There are still things kind of left on the table. So right now, it's really weird for me right now because I am of two minds. And yeah, I think I'll have a full better answer after Deadpool Wolverine comes out and I see what happens in that movie, what Wolverine this is, what he means to his world, what he means to this world. I don't know when all that happens, but yeah, it's weird for me right now to kind of talk about.
I think with Deadpool and Wolverine, the initial announcement of it just got me excited because I knew that Hugh Jackman wouldn't come back if it wasn't meaningful, if it didn't feel important and feel worthwhile to come back to this role. And I've said this before, and I think that that's all the reassurance that I need. There's actually a really, really great Vanity Fair story about the early development of Deadpool 3, which would become Deadpool and Wolverine, and just sort of the problems that Sean Levy and Ryan Reynolds were having with developing a story. And Hugh Jackman approached them and said, what if we do this? What if we do this? What if we go down this direction? And the important thing that they mentioned in that story is that the legacy of Logan is kept intact. That movie is pretty much untouched. The events of that movie happen. They're not changing things. They're not altering things. Like, that is a real occurrence that's going to be addressed in the movie. And that was one of the first challenges that they wanted to address, is the fact that, like, yeah, we had this near perfect send off. Like, Hugh, we can't mess that up. And they figured out a way, which we have yet to see, but they figured out a way to preserve that ending. And that was always the most important thing, because you've done something that rarely gets done here, and that's give a proper send off to a character and to a franchise, an entire era of filmmaking, which is just, again, that's an extraordinary effort that's rarely been done, and it's a near impossibility to achieve it, to make everybody happy. And so the fact that they made the choice to come back, that in itself signals to me that it's going to be something that's definitely worthwhile. And as you said, there were so many things still left on the table, like the costume, the team up elements between him and Wade Wilson. We just never got that. Like, there was still actually enough there that they could explore. But to go back to Logan, though, there's an important moment in the movie where there's a lot of references and inclusions of X-Men comics. Like, they actually have comic books in the movie, because this is also like a post-apocalyptic world. It's set in the future. It's set in 2029. It resembles a lot of our world, but there are certain small things in there that showcase that this does take place in the future. But the film includes some vintage X-Men comic books, used both to advance the plot, but also like as a meta-fictional reference to the characters. And James Mangold clarified that Marvel Comics allowed this on the condition that they use actual characters and designs, that they could use actual characters and designs, but not use any real comic book issues. And so they had to create original comic book covers and pages that were seen in the film. And Mango commented that, quote, the reality was that, like in Unforgiven, when Eastwood runs into Richard Harris, who's writing these fictional accounts of the great Western heroes, or Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, where you've got these aging heroes who are kind of in the twilight versions of their own legends. I think that idea of being kind of a celebrity or like a sports star long past your heyday was really interesting for me to investigate with this kind of world, end quote. And I think that becomes the movie. The setting of the film is set in the future. The X-Men are gone. They hint at it all the time that something Charles did caused the destruction and the devastation of the X-Men. It's really just him and Logan now. And there's really
Yeah.
a lack of mutants. And so what do you think about just that being the whole setup, that they have just taken this story such a significant step forward, I think to a surprising degree, to say, like, this is a world without heroes. This is not a superheroic world. This is really a world where the last two of their kind are in their final days. And I think that that's certainly very reminiscent of what Clint Eastwood achieved in Unforgiven. It's these stars that were idolized at one point, but now they're well past their prime and they're having to deal with all of the consequences of their actions.
Man, first of all, what a just a cool idea and a cool story. To take that idea and make it so post-apocalyptic, mixed with so much Western cowboy energy. I just think it's just like, hell yeah, let's do that thing, because we hadn't really gotten that up until this point. This definitely feels like the true first superhero film in isolation. You know what I mean? Like, from so many things, we hadn't gotten that really post-apocalyptic superhero movies at all, really.
Yeah.
Up until this point,
Like the
right? Like, this
aftermath
was,
of, like, look at everything that's
yeah.
happened, and now we actually have to deal with that shit far down the line in the future.
Exactly. And what's so crazy, X-Men has had in its lore, not the movies, but in its comic book lore, there are moments where, like, Wanda is mad and just goes, "No more mutants." You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like this has happened in the comics, and it was just like, wait a second, are y'all really about to put this on the big screen? And so, man, it in some ways it's a risk because it hasn't been done before, but it's also like, why haven't we done this before? Like, what have we been doing? Where has this been the whole time? And so, yeah, man, I really love this aspect of the film, especially, you know, we're talking about the Wolverine and how Western that already was, right? It's like, it's almost like, all right, let's strip away a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? Let's take away a little bit more. Let's take away again some of that more Japanese influence and some of the technology too. Because what also makes Wolverine a little bit cool, it's like we don't always get iterations of what Samurai Shinobi look like in the new age. We don't always get that. That's why the Wolverine's also like, oh shoot, no, this is 2013. There's a ninja in 2013. What's going on here? That's a cool thing about the film, and I feel like taking away that piece, it's like, no, this is still a character study in a Western kind of type thing. That's what almost helps us lead into Logan. It's just really cool, I think, ideas, and I'm glad to know that they studied to that degree to be like, yeah, we're going to make this film instead. It was just really cool, man.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we just talked about sort of the unprecedented nature of it being a send off for a character, which hadn't really been done. And I think a large part of that is because we just hadn't had a franchise run as long as this did. You know, this was
Exactly.
going on 17 years now where they were developing these X-Men movies. And, you know, they go so far as to, in the movie, include a scene and a reference from a classic Western, Shane, which is an incredible movie. And it was so funny because I actually saw Shane well before I saw Logan. I saw that movie for the first time in high school. My high school film and English professor, Mr. Beekman, rest in peace, he showed us that movie. And I was like, this is incredible. This is a great story. And then seeing it introduced in Logan and how it connects to the themes of that film, because Shane is ultimately a movie about a cowboy who comes into a town. He comes across some pretty ordinary circumstances, but he's had a life of violence, and that violence has sort of ravaged his body. It's taken him to
Mm-hmm.
a really dark place, and it's done some very damaging things to his body and his soul. And so now he has to, I guess, sort of take it upon himself to remedy that with just one good act that he could perform in that movie. And of course, the character of Logan and Wolverine at this point, because we've seen him so much, we know that he's lived for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. He has committed a lot of very violent acts. He's murdered a lot of people. He's killed a lot of people. He's also, you know, tried to be a hero, but he's wrestled with that idea. He's lost people. Like, there's just so much that he's been through. And then on top of that, you add in Charles Xavier. They bring him back to make him
Mm-hmm.
significant to the story as well, because now he's aging. He's definitely on his last legs. And they almost switch roles in this movie, because when we first get introduced to Hugh Jackman as Logan, you know, Charles is kind of his caretaker. He's bringing him into the family, but now Logan has to care for him. It's like what you would have to do as a child taking care of your aging parents when they're getting up there in age, and you have to just be there for the last stages of their life because they physically can't take care of themselves. And that
Mm-hmm.
completely subverts expectations of what we would think these characters to be. Again, this is just all stuff that had never
Yeah.
really been explored. That's what makes Logan so different and so unique in and
Mm-hmm.
of itself. Let's continue to talk about Charles Xavier though, because again, like this was the most screen time that he had really gotten in this franchise in a long time.
Yeah.
He was, of course,
Mm-hmm.
in Days of Future Past, and they had obviously the younger iteration of him portrayed
Mm-hmm.
in the X-Men First Class movies, that reboot franchise. But Patrick Stewart proper, though he was in Days of Future Past, he wasn't necessarily a main character. Here, he is co-starring alongside Hugh Jackman, and really, I think, is as important to this send-off to this particular era of characters as Hugh Jackman is. So, what do you want to just say about his inclusion here and how he was integrated into the story?
Yeah, it's so interesting to see, you know, like the table flip, where, you know, he's Professor X took in him, took in Logan. That's like the whole thing, and the reason why he loves Professor X. He took him in, but now he's made to take care of Professor X, and in such a way, shoot, Logan becomes a caretaker. Period. You know what I'm saying? We don't really get this per se in the early movies too much. Besides, kind of again a little bit his relationship with him and Rogue. But the only times we really see him kind of like on this level trying to take care of other people is on a comic book level, to be honest, and maybe a little bit in some of the animated series, you know, that he was a part of. And so this was like, whoa, Logan, sometimes you can really take care of yourself, which is like kind of his point. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Kind of Logan's point is like, what the hell am I supposed to do with these people? I can really take care of myself. I got so much shit going on. Now I gotta watch oh boy take a shit and pee, and like it's a lot going on for him, man. But it's really cool, I think, to see that table flip, and because Professor X means enough to him that he's like, bro, I gotta watch you. Not only that, but there is like the whole burden of Professor X helped kill a lot of X-Men in this world. Like people got slaughtered because of this dude's dementia. Like this is not good. But I'm one of the only people that can take care of that as well. So yeah, man, it's such a crazy dark way to look at the world. And in fact, I think about that's what Deadpool's alluding to right in the trailer, where he's like, "Oh, you're different in this world." You know what I'm saying? You can watch a lot of shit happen in this world. Whatever he says, I'm like, yeah. If this is the Logan version, this dude have been through all kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? Or any kind of iteration close to Logan. This is crazy. So seeing Professor X here, I loved how much screen time he had because he Professor X had done so much it's all about how he takes care of people. Now he's time for him to be taken care of. He looks hopeless. Anytime he does use his powers, it's people are about to die. Like this is not a good thing that his powers are going off. So it's just really cool how different of a world they made. But now Professor X is like an accidental villain of the story. It's like, oh shit, Grandpa, you know what I'm saying? Grandpa's is dementia's going off again, but it's dangerous. And so yeah, it was a very cool threat to see. But man, it rose the stakes significantly for the world they built.
And what a fall from grace as well. We're
Mm-hmm.
so used to seeing these characters propped up as beacons of hope, as bastions of their community, of the mutant community. They're often so heroic, so strong, so physically powerful and incapable. And then by this movie, you look at them and you're like, oh no, they are in no condition to save anything or anybody. Like Logan is an alcoholic, and as you said, he can barely take care of himself. He's forgetful. He's also increasingly becoming more and more vulnerable to being human and dying eventually because the adamantium has essentially poisoned his body. It's actually hurting him now and potentially killing him. And then Professor X, Charles, I mean, he doesn't even remember exactly how he was responsible for the death of the X-Men. And I just love that they don't even give us the specifics. They just say the event in Westchester
Mm-hmm.
and that 7 X-Men died. And you can assume who those 7 X-Men are. Like we really only had the 7 primary ones, and the original ones, you know, Storm, Jean Grey, Cyclops, so on and so forth, Beast probably. But something significant happened. And now he is such a dangerous threat. And you just often have to ask the question watching this movie, like, how long can he live like this? Like, this is almost somebody at the tail end of their life, afflicted with an illness. And I think as a family, you start to ask those questions like, are they living quality life anymore? Is it even worth them being here? And he even has that himself. Like how much longer can you go through, you know, this pain, this torment, this uncontrollable nature of what your dementia and your mind is doing to just other people? It's actively harming quite a few people here. And again, this is just what James Mangold excels at. Character. These are real
Mm-hmm.
small, local, intimate stakes. This is about a father figure and a son figure, and the
Mm-hmm.
son like figure taking care of his father,
Yeah.
often to his own detriment, right? And that's just what makes this so special. And to see these two do it together, who had, you know, at this point pretty much been the longest actors portraying their characters in live action, both of them debuting in 2000. It was a really, really brilliant choice. We should also talk about Daphne Keen here,
Oh yeah.
who makes pretty much her breakthrough role, her breakthrough appearance in this movie. She pops up as Laura. We find out through the story that she's actually the son of Logan. Daphne Keen was about 11 years old at the time when she got casted. They did a worldwide search for who was going to play this character. It was really, really important. They searched through probably about 1,000 young girls, and James
Wow.
Mangold determined pretty early, well, because her character was tested in a Mexico City facility, well, she probably should be able to speak Spanish. And so we need somebody that's
Yeah.
bilingual. They have to speak English and Spanish. This person also has to have dramatic chops. Also, there's a lot of action with this young character. So you have to find somebody
Mm, physical.
that can do all of this, be very physical, can be threatening, can give off the impression that they don't speak, but then on the flip of a dime, they're actually very smart, very intuitive, know a lot of information. There's probably not a ton of actresses that can do that, but here we discover Daphne Keen, who was included in this movie, is really kind of the third lead, and essentially the daughter-like figure, the daughter role to Logan, who he has to all of a sudden look after, throughout the course of this film as well. Really because of, Charles Xavier really pushing him to do so and just reminding him like, yeah, this is your daughter, bro. Look at her. Think about her. Like, she looks and feels and acts exactly like you. Like, take this responsibility. What do you want to say about Daphne Keen here, man? Just her introduction really in this story and just how much she means ultimately to the final product of the film.
Wow, what a performance, bro. What a breakthrough. Like, holy shit, you did that. In hindsight, looking at this film, I know it was up for Academy Award for best screenplay, I think it was.
Best original screenplay, yeah.
Original screenplay. But when I look at the acting, I'm like, y'all hate comic book movies, bro. Because there's no way both Daphne Keen and Hugh Jackman wasn't on the block for best actor and actress. Even she could have got support in something. At least say her name. So they both were going nuts. And Daphne Keen, man, to be such a young actress and to bring, I think, literally to me, like the perfect depiction of exactly what she was supposed to do in this movie. Like, I can't imagine if she did anything else at any point in time. Like, she was hitting every beat she was supposed to hit to me. She was doing it all, man. She had the physical. Her bilingualness was perfect. I love how angry she was all the time. Even her growls and her anger was like, yeah, you literally feel like a little baby girl Wolverine. Like, this is literally perfect. She did that. I really love seeing her in this role, and I think she did so much, man. In fact, thinking about this too, and I thought this at the time, it's just so crazy as an industry that loves sequels and loves to have money and all of these things that they weren't like X-23 movie. It like blows my mind. It actually blows my mind that it didn't say, oh yeah, we're gonna make an X-23 movie, because you got the send-off, right? You got the send-off of Wolverine and the other X-Men. X-20, she just went off with her friends. Y'all could do something else, and they didn't do it. So it's very surprising, I think, in that way. But man, she is exceptional in this film. Yeah, I couldn't imagine anybody else. I couldn't imagine her doing it any other way. She did that, bro, and I'm very glad to say she's one of my favorite parts of the movie for sure.
It's almost alchemy, the fact that they discovered her
crazy.
And that this worked. I mean, this is a really young girl. Now, I will say, her parents were actors, so they were pretty accomplished. And so she had some really, really good pedigree. She had done a couple of things before this, but this was really, truly her breakthrough role. But just because of all the boxes that she checks, the language, her ability to be bilingual, to be physical, to just showcase this range of emotions, it separates her from probably anybody else that they saw. And the chemistry between her and Hugh Jackman is off the charts. It's ridiculous, just the interactions that they have in this movie. And there's those moments where she's acting like she's a mute for the first half of the movie. She's acting like she can't speak, but she knows that she can speak. She's actually very capable of that and can be very communicative. And the moment when she reveals that she can speak to Logan in the film, he's like, wait, you can fucking talk? Why haven't you said anything this entire time? And then she goes on her rampant sort of rampage about all of the other mutants that she wants to find. She wants to go to North Dakota. They're arguing back and forth, and he's like, shut the fuck up. And then she punches him. She can do all these things. She can yell at him. She can communicate to him. She can get physical with him. Like, to make that so believable, it's really, really crazy that they pulled it off in the way that they did. I mean, she's such a revelation in the movie. And I just love everything that they did. She's really one of the strongest elements and gives, I think, the heart to the film at the end of the day. It's truly what separates this from just another ordinary comic book film. Like, the heart that she injects into it, especially in the third act, it's unreal. It's just unreal what she does in those final scenes. And so just an extraordinary find. And I love that she's still working. She's in the Acolyte right now, the new Star Wars show. And I wonder and want to ask, do you think that she's going to pop up in Deadpool and Wolverine? Will we possibly see an older X-23 in that film in a few weeks?
That girl in that movie, bro. I don't care. That girl in that movie, bro.
She needs to be.
Even on the press tour for Acolyte, people are asking her about it. She's like, oh, I'm so honored that people even think about me in that role. I'm not in it. She's lying. This girl's lying.
Lying through her
Daphne
teeth.
Keen is in that movie, bro, and I'm gonna be lit when I see her in it. That girl's in that movie.
She got to be. She really got to be. To your point, the fact that they didn't do a proper X-23 movie, we got to get some closure with that. We got to see her one more
Come on,
time.
bro.
And she's older now. She's like 19 years old now. So
Now she's really ready for X-23.
she's actually like
it's
age
time.
appropriate. So yeah, that'll be an incredible find if that is like a big discovery in the movie. I can't wait. We should talk about the violence in this film. Full rated R. They finally pulled the trigger. They finally said it's time.
Finally.
It's gonna be gory, bloody, violent, sadistic, everything under the sun. And they pull no punches. I mean, in the marketing, in the lead up to the movie, we knew it was going to be rated R. They confirmed that a couple of years before that they were finally going to take it to that place. But when you watch this movie and you see the opening scene, you know, Logan is this driver, this chauffeur, and he comes into contact with those people outside of that bar. I think it's in Oklahoma City that they are. This is literally within the first 5 minutes of the movie. It gets so bloody, so immediately, so fast. We just see, oh, they're not playing. They're not pulling any punches. What did you think about that at the time? Because they just never went to this level before. And also, like, in totality with the genre, really the only significant rated R movie that we had gotten was Deadpool, which came out the year prior. And so Fox had basically been the only studio in town that decided, like, yeah, we're going to go to these full lengths of taking these really, really mature stories to another level with the violence. Because I think prior to that, the only real example we had was Blade, you know, in 1998. That was definitely rated R, but we hadn't seen it in a modern context. So what did you think about that opening sequence and just like how they injected and utilized violence to help elevate and further the story throughout the film?
Yeah, first, I didn't know we were going to get that violent that fast. It was like, opening scene, slice through the head. Like, what? How did we get here?
Leave no fucking doubt for anybody here. Like, this shit is rated R. Believe me.
No, James Mangold was like, we got to tell them it's rated R in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, y'all have to know, like, what y'all about to get yourselves into. So I knew almost immediately that I was going to about to have a good time with that movie as soon as I seen that. But it is so interesting to see that Fox was the one to pull the trigger on this rated R thing, man. And part of me does wonder if, like, you know, up until this point, a lot of the fails that we've been talking about, does that lead to this? Like, does Fantastic Four not doing so well help them say, you know what, we might need to do something else? This is the fail of Origins. Say, you know, maybe we need to go, you know, go do something. I wonder if that really leads us to this moment. But it's such a welcome change. And for everybody who was into comics at the time, Logan in the comics is doing shit like that. We're all like, all right, y'all, if y'all gonna do this, it's time. Like, y'all gotta, let's get serious here. And in movies, in a lot of ways, in that moment, we're getting more serious and we're getting more gritty. We were again in the landscape of the Dark Knight and stuff had passed. Like that grittiness feel, we needed it and we wanted more of it. And it was like, Logan is the perfect character for this. We need rated R. And it's like, so I'm glad we finally got it, but it was such a welcome change. I don't even know if this movie would be like what it would be without that, though. Like, it needed, it sounds crazy, but like, it needed that violence. It needed, we needed to see that for us to take this universe serious. How the death of how Logan was going out serious, like a lot of these threats, we needed to see how dark this was. And I think that rated R rating, man, it helped do so much for this movie.
It was absolutely needed, and it's quite surprising we had gone so long without tapping into this, you know, in a meaningful way. To your point, the comics had already explored this stuff, and just from a logistical standpoint, a guy with adamantium claws coming out of his hand, slicing people, stabbing people, chopping off limbs, and where's the blood? Where's the fucking blood, y'all? Like, how does this make any sense that in all of these movies we're seeing Logan use these weapons and use them efficiently and effectively, but there's no blood to be found anywhere. There was no significant. I think the most blood maybe was in like X2, you know, when he has that fight and you see some of the blood dripping. But it's like, come on, this is amateur hour. Like, we got to go there. We got to go to that level. And also the tone of the movie just necessitates a rated R. You know, it necessitates a really, really dark tone, and we got to add the violence on top of that. This is a violent world. This is now a violent reality, and for them to just unleash in the opening minutes that way was incredible. I mean, he literally chops a guy's arm off. Like, we see an entire limb just get chopped off. Like, in the first few seconds, it's like, oh yeah, we got here. We've gotten to the place where this character has earned this type of leeway, this type of freedom to explore stuff like this and to take this calculated risk in this way. And I think it's just ironic that they decided to make rated R movies later in their juncture of controlling these characters. And historically, rated R movies make a little bit less money just because everybody can't go to see them in the movie theaters. But it turns out that their rated R efforts ended up being two of their highest grossing movies that they ever made in Deadpool and Logan. Like
Mm-hmm.
those ended up making the most money. This was the highest grossing of the franchise. And it's like, yeah, we kind of wanted to see this all along. This was kind of necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to the violence, I think one of the most violent characters in the film is X-24, which is the exact replica
Oh
of
my God.
Logan in the
Yeah.
film. He becomes, kind of the physical antagonist of the movie, especially in the second half. They have these other characters portrayed by Boyd Holbrook and Richard E. Grant, who were sort of the controlling puppeteers of what's happening. But
Mm-hmm.
X-24 is the physical threat. You have to have a physical threat for Logan. And when he pops up in the movie, I mean, it's a dark moment. It's
Oh
increasingly
my
dark and
God.
scary because he slaughters an entire family that's taken Logan in, that's taken Charles in,
A
and
black
young
family,
Laura
damn it.
in, and a black family at that. It was a shame to see Elise Neal go out that way too. But
Yeah.
what did you think about that moment? Because I remember this being probably the most shocking piece of the film up until that point, because literally Charles dies. He gets killed by X-24, and then he slaughters everybody else pretty much in the house. But this really just raises the stakes to a whole new degree entirely.
Like you said, it was the most shocking part of the movie up until that point. I think the first shocking, I think, idea was just that Professor X had killed all these people. That was like the first, like, whoa, Professor X killed all these X-Men and people. This is crazy. This is like the one I was like, okay, no, this is happening. Y'all really are axing people off in this thing. It was like another. It's like another tipping point where you're like, no, we need to take this movie serious. Like, these people just died, and it also kind of got deep in that moment too, though, because this dude X-24 is legit a clone of Wolverine. Literally, his face, his body, his adamantium, it's like literally copy paste. And it was like, oh man, y'all trying to do some deep, you know what I mean, characteristic things here and make some relations here. So yeah, bro, it was. I definitely remember being like, this is insane. I can't. But I mean, it's so sad in that moment too, because you're like, these are the nicest people in the whole movie. It was like,
So
y'all trying to go
nice.
get some dinner. Y'all trying to get dinner, and Logan was trying to say no, but Professor X was like, that would be lovely, or whatever he says. I was like, oh man, y'all didn't slaughtered this family. So yeah, it was. But also, I love the threat of X-24. I love that it is. This is it's so crazy because we talk about like, oh, not another doppelganger, not Iron Man versus Iron Man, not
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying, not another Vision versus Vision. What are we doing here? But this is the time where, because it made sense for the character and made sense physically, it was so welcome. It was like, hell yeah, this would be a villain that makes sense. It worked out completely for me, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's the physical manifestation of the metaphor that Logan is his own worst enemy. And one
Exactly.
of my favorite small moments in the movie is when X-24 is walking down the steps. He has Laura in his hands, and Logan just looks at him in the face, and he's at a loss for words. Obviously, he's in shock because he sees that like murder has happened. There's some really, really significant stuff going on here, but he's looking at himself, and he looks up at the steps, and X-24 walks around him, and he looks back, and he doesn't know what to make of it. He can't even attack him because he hasn't even processed like what's going on here. And then he goes to
Mm-hmm.
see what condition Charles is in after that moment. It's just such a great moment that really, I think, puts a nice bow on what this has all been about for the character. Just the fact that he's had such an internal battle with himself, and they set the seeds of this. They planted the seeds for this in Logan. These ideas, they planted them in the Wolverine. A few short years before this, and now they're paying off in physical form, where he has to overcome his physical superior, but it's himself. Because X-24 is younger, faster, smarter, stronger, whatever the case may be,
Mm-hmm.
and he has to confront that head on. It's such a masterstroke. And then Charles's death. I mean, it's incredible, the acting that Patrick Stewart does in that moment, because he's in the bed, he's about to go to sleep, and he says, Logan, he thinks Logan, is in the room with him about to tell him goodnight. And he's like, this is one of the most perfect nights I've had in a long time. One of the most perfect nights that I can remember. I'm just so thankful that this happened. And he's like, I can't even remember what I did in Westchester,
Mm-hmm.
referencing the event, but I'm just so
Mm-hmm.
grateful for this moment right now. And then he dies. He gets killed by X-24. It's like, oh my God, what are y'all doing here? He finally reached a place of peace, of happiness. He had a moment of normalcy, probably the first
Yeah.
that he's had in years, maybe a really long time. And we just see him go out like that. Just can't stress the importance of just the send off here and what they did for Patrick Stewart. I mean, of course, he's
Mm-hmm.
come back. We've seen him in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. He's likely in Deadpool and Wolverine again. But
Probably.
I don't know anything else you want to add just about Patrick Stewart. Just like how much that moment meant, for his character. Yes, it was violent and it's sad to see him go out in that way. But again, thinking about the character and just like the whole journey that he had been on, what did that moment mean to you to see him, finally have that moment? And then maybe even fast forwarding to seeing like Logan bury him, and not really being able to
Mm-hmm.
verbalize the pain that he was experiencing in that moment.
Yeah, it's so crazy because entering, I think, a Logan film in general, or a movie centered around the Wolverine and Logan, you don't really think like the themes of family is like going to come up so hearty. You know what I mean? It comes up and you're like, whoa, y'all are going kind of a little too crazy here, because there's the kind of that moment that you're talking about where he is at peace, but he's telling Logan like, yo, this is what family looks like.
Mm.
Like, this is peaceful, man. Like, we had dinner tonight. We laughed. We're around people. There's no other worries in the world. Nobody, in these past probably couple hours, that they spent with this family, nobody had to be classified as a mutant. You know what I'm saying? We're just kind of people, just living. And now this is one of the few times I'm not on the run. I don't have to worry about my dementia. He probably remembered the last 2 hours. That probably helped. You know what I'm saying? Like, he probably, so yeah,
Mind
that's what's
finally
going on. That
working.
probably,
Yeah.
yeah, his mind was finally working, but it's because that family piece. I think that he's like, man, it's the best night I had in a minute, man. He probably remembers all those times at the X Mansion, because there probably are quiet times in the mansion, right, where everybody's eating together and having fun with each other, and that's it. It's that relationship piece, and he finally got that. And of course, he dies the way he dies. It is dark in that way, but also it also it also makes me think of like kind of the idea of how Wolverine had to kill Jean. Now it's a fake Wolverine having to kill Professor X,
Mm.
and Jean killed Professor X. It's crazy how that circle works, but it's like, damn, that's what took us to get to this point, man. But yeah, I still think it was a good send off. His burial was also a good send off to me, because again, these moments, these small intimate moments, man, when Daphne Keen grabs just the wrist of Wolverine. Doesn't grab her hand, because neither one of them are at that level yet.
Yeah.
Neither they probably don't even know what the hell holding hands is. Neither one of them. But when she can see he's in distress and that he has lost a father figure, and she just grabs his wrist real quick, that's a send off to me. That's a great job. Like, that means it was an emotional moment. So still a good send off. It was violent and it was dark, and I understand it's still a terrible way to go out, but I think it made sense for what the character is, or who the character is.
And the reminder that Logan still has family and still has something to live for. Like
Yeah.
in the worst, darkest moment probably of his life, in the moment of despair, when he has to bury this father figure, which signifies the finality of death. That's often the hardest part of funerals, is seeing a coffin go into the ground or burying somebody
Mm-hmm.
legitimately, because it just feels so final. And that's when he realizes it and gets choked up. He can't even utter the words that he wants to say. But when she grabs his wrist, that is a signal to us as an audience, and to him, like, there's still somebody you have, like, there is still somebody to
Mm-hmm.
live for and to fight for. And then you juxtapose that with like the next few minutes, and I'm so conflicted at this moment, because I never know how to feel. But
Mm-hmm.
when he goes back to his pickup truck
Mm-hmm.
and he gets in the truck and he just like, it's like, fuck, shit, and he just starts yelling, and then he just starts breaking shit and just hammering shit, and she's just like watching
Yeah.
him. I'm always I don't know whether to laugh, because it kind of feels
Yeah.
funny. It's almost like,
Mm-hmm.
yo, is this
Yeah.
how you're exhibiting your anger and your grief right now?
Mm-hmm.
Or to feel bad for him. I don't know if I'm alone in that, or if you've ever thought that, but like a small part of me doesn't laugh initially, but then as he just continues to go
Yeah.
on, I'm like,
He
I'm
keeps
starting to
doing it.
laugh at
Mm-hmm.
that moment.
Yeah, it's because also like we get only very subtle moments of Wolverine also doing stuff like that in terms of like expressing like a really a real emotion based off something. Usually he just yelling because he's about to go fight somebody or kill somebody. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm Wolverine. What is this thing? But here it's like, no, he's actually having to respond. And it's like silent. You know what I'm saying? And uh, uh, you know, Daphne Keen just kind of watching him like, well, I've, I've, I'm sure that's how I react too, because she's baby Wolverine. She's probably like, well, yeah.
She's also probably
that's also
she's also probably like, you have never fucking dealt with any of this anger. You are letting it all out, right? You've never been to therapy. You have not dealt with this in any efficient, effective way.
Yeah, it's like the emotional intelligence piece of it, like being able to let your emotions go in a super healthy way. And I don't think he really knows how to quantify what's happening or what just has happened to his reality with, the death of Professor X. Is very interesting.
Yeah. As we move into like the final moments of the movie, one of the subplots is the fact that they are creating mutants, from mutant DNA to essentially turn them into weapons. That's the whole role of Laura and why she's included here, and the reference to her as X-23. But there's also like other young mutants, other children, and she wants to go to North Dakota to save them. And they introduce them really in the third act of the movie, and they team up with Logan, and there's a big fight. We get to see a lot of their powers, and it's pretty cool because we've yet to see up until this point in this franchise, maybe with a few small exceptions in X2, some of the children in Xavier's school, we hadn't really seen younger mutants, and we hadn't seen them use their powers. How did you feel about that? Like, especially in the third act when there was this big showdown in the forest, we get to see a lot of them, and even some of their powers remind us of like other mutants that we've already known, other X-Men that we've already seen. Some of them are almost like copies of those characters that they've taken the DNA from to try to create these new weapons.
Yeah, I thought it was cool that that they decided to do that, like, because of course Laura had been a copy of Logan, that we would see a little bit of some of those younger children be reminiscent of some of the X-Men that we know, man. And to make them, these kids were like kind of demented and kind of violent. Like when they were killing old boy, I forgot his name, one of the main assailants. What's that dude's name? I forgot.
Pierce.
Pierce.
When
they had him on the ground, bro, she wrapped him in the plants, and then the ice girl. I was like, y'all are scaring the shit out of me. But I actually remember in this moment too, and maybe I don't know if New Mutants had already been announced or not at this time.
I don't think so. That's the crazy thing. I don't think
so. Yeah. But I remember being like, oh shit, are they going for the New Mutants? Like, if these kids escape, is this going to be like our New Mutants? And I still don't know why we didn't go to that direction. Clearly it's like hello, it's right there. I don't know why they didn't do that. But I remember being like pretty like, damn, I like this, because we still, again, up until this point, like you said, hadn't gotten those younger mutants using their powers. We've only gotten the older, more experienced X-Men always. You know what I'm saying? That's all we've really gotten. So I thought it was cool to see them. Richter was a whole thing, very important to that whole. I guess that was technically Eden. It didn't look like Eden.
Yeah,
like comic books.
Yeah, right. I think
I guess it was technically Eden. But yeah, it was cool to see Richter. I was a little surprised about Richter because I just thought he would use his powers a little bit more. He used his powers like one time, I think, in the whole thing. I thought he would use it more. But man, it was cool seeing a lot of those young mutants, man. I wish we had seen even more of them. I don't know how. I don't know where. Again, it should have been the New Mutants, but I wish we'd seen more of them.
And we got to talk about the final moments really quick here. Basically, Logan gets mortally wounded by X-24. They fight, and X-24 takes him and throws him on shredded wood, which pierces, his abdomen, and this is something he can't come back from. A lot of the adamantium and the I guess the stuff that he injected himself with, it's ultimately just killing him, and it's removing his invulnerability, his regenerative powers, all of that stuff that's long kept him alive. It's slowly but surely evaporating away, and so he gets mortally wounded here, and that's it for him. And him and Laura share, a really, really sweet moment. His final words to her is basically to tell her not to become, the weapon that he was ultimately made to be. And she finally acknowledges and accepts him as her father and calls him daddy in that moment. And then they bury him, and she takes the makeshift cross that they've made out of the branches, and she turns it on its side to formulate the X, and the music swells, and that's the end of the movie. I mean, I love this movie, and I watch it, all the time. And it's truly those final few seconds that still just get me choked up every single time. I don't know what it is. It's like it's just an emotional response that elicits, you know, certain emotions out of me every time that always affects me. What do you want to just say about just like that final send off for him and just like how they concluded and wrapped up his story, and also just like that final connection that he had with his daughter?
Wow. Yeah, man. I think it really is just that response. It really feels. It's just good writing. It's just good writing. We're going through this whole movie, and Logan finds out this girl's technically his daughter. Really, like legit. It's your DNA, bro. Like that's your daughter. And he's denying it. In some ways, she's denying it. But now I'm made to get her safe. And throughout this whole thing, and this is what we're talking about, that stems off the back of the Wolverine, which I think is done so well, man, where it's like anything I touch, and he says this in Logan too, but anybody that's around me, anybody I touch gets hurt, or you know, or doesn't want to be around me anymore. And it's crazy because now he's made to look in the mirror in more than one way. He has to look in the mirror for X-24, first and foremost, who we're talking about. But when he looks in the mirror of Daphne Keen, young Laura as X-23, it's actually a version of him that is younger, that can be better than him with the same powers that he has, that can live a different life that he lived, that also comes from a lab background that he comes from now with the lab background. It's like, you're too much like me, and it definitely scares me. And to see that relationship kind of somewhat slowly become a thing throughout the course of the film, it does everything by the end of the film for me, when she has to bury him, man. Even before she buries him, even when she's like cutting him out of the tree, I was like, oh my god, this is really it for my boy. This is like,
That's how you know, yeah.
I'm like, you see the tree and you're like, nah, bro, this is over. She uses that last adamantium bullet on X-24, and it's like, oh my god, Logan is about to go out, but what is he going to do, and what is he going to say? And again, the whole, you know, you be better than me, whatever he says, it was just like, man, yeah, it gets me choked up every time too, because it just means so. It's like the true definition of like legacy. And that's the kind of the whole point too, of like, of course, Logan as a character, but it was all, this is at the time in my mind, this is also like an X-Men send-off. It's like an X-Men Fox send
This is the
off. You
end
know
of
what
a
I'm saying? Like, this is
franchise,
it.
literally, yeah.
This is end of all of it. This is end of all of it. And again, what that legacy looks like. And Daphne Keen as Laura was that legacy. Look, there's somebody who looks like you, talks like you. She gets angry like you, but she's made to live a different life. But she's now also made to bury who the father she just met. That's a story, bro. That's writing. You know what I'm saying? That's writing. Oh, and then I'll never get over her turning the cross into an X either. It's just like, yeah, no, get X-Men, like, we're out of here, bro. So yeah, it'll always be an amazing moment, and I'll never get over it, bro. It was really and truly a great send off, and what exactly I wanted to see out of the end of not only Logan, but again at the time out of a franchise. I was like, yeah, y'all did that.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the characters are wrapped up into Logan at this point. You know, I think he crossed paths with everybody, all the actors that we grew attachments to. Everything intersected with this character through whatever iteration they were entering into with this X-Men franchise, whether it was the rebooted series with First Class, or the original trilogy, or the spinoffs. Like, everything revolved around him, you know. So it truly was like, yes, he is getting this proper send off, and he is like at the end of his life, but it was also just all of that. You remember all of those things. That's truly, it stands out when she creates the X out of the cross. That's where it's like, oh no, this is the end of an era. We're closing a book on everything. And you know, we only ended up getting 3 more movies from Fox after this: Deadpool 2, Dark Phoenix, and the New Mutants, and none of those are send-offs, and 2 of them are bad movies, you know. And it's just now that we're going to return to this storyline and figure out a way, I guess, to give a proper send-off, you know, to everybody in totality. But at that time, when this came out and this moment happened, it predated what we even saw with Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame.
Yeah,
you know. And
exactly.
that moment, it's louder and bigger, and I would say more impactful for more people, just because the MCU is significantly more popular than what the Fox X-Men franchise was. But they did this first. We had not gotten a character to die off in this manner. Even with the send off of Christian Bale, he fake died and came back, and he
wasn't really dead. He was happy with his
he toasts Alfred and gives him a nod, so he wasn't even really dead. We never saw this. We never saw anything like this. And for people who had been following this franchise from day one, who had saw these movies in theaters, who had saw X-Men in 2000, who bought the DVDs and the discs for the PSP and watched these on cable
Yeah.
and streaming and went to the movies and were disappointed and excited and let down and hopeful. I mean, you just go through a wave of emotions. It's literally an attachment that we develop to these characters, and to see him go out in such a beautiful way, it was extraordinary. It was just so well done, and just kudos to Hugh Jackman and Daphne Keen for what they pulled off emotionally in that scene. It was really, really, just really terrific work. This movie did great. Everybody loved it pretty much when it came out. Like I said earlier, only had a production budget of $97 million. At the North American box office, made $226.3 million. Worldwide, it made $392.7 million for a worldwide total gross of $619.2 million. One of the highest rated, or one of the highest grossing rated R movies of all time, the highest grossing movie in the Wolverine franchise, and definitely one of the top 3 or 4 highest grossing films in the entire X-Men franchise. When it earned $88.4 million in its opening weekend, the film scored the biggest Wolverine movie opening, the biggest rated R opening for March, the 4th biggest March opening weekend, only behind Batman v Superman, Hunger Games, Alice in Wonderland. It was also the 5th largest X-Men opening, the 4th biggest rated R opening weekend overall, only behind Deadpool, The Matrix, Reloaded, and American Sniper. So it was breaking a lot of records. And in an opening weekend poll conducted by Fandango, 71% of responders said that more superhero films should be rated R. You don't say. While 86% were interested in seeing a more violent adult X-Men film that weekend. So this might have signaled a paradigm shift in how stories were going to be told. 93% of critics gave it a positive review on Rotten Tomatoes, average score of 77 out of 100 on Metacritic, A- cinema score from audience members. It went on to be nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. I said Best Original earlier. That was a mistake, but Best Adapted. The first time that a comic book movie nominated for an Oscar, making history.
Wow.
Upon the reflection of the movie and just the reception of it, I mean, how did it make you feel that this was just like universally loved? Of course, seeing the movie and knowing it was good, but then to know that this resonated, this worked, for everybody that saw it, and it also possibly signaled, maybe things can change. Maybe we can do things a little bit different with these more mature, rated R, more adult oriented stories down the line.
It made me excited to know this is really legit another milestone in, I think, what was capable in the comic book genre. Already at this time, of course, there was so much coming out about comic book movies and what they could and couldn't be, what they are not, what the MCU is doing, what a lot of people don't like about the MCU. And what's funny is, in a lot of ways, Logan was everything that a lot of people didn't like about the MCU. It wasn't funny. It wasn't it wasn't this big bombastic over the top fight scene happening in the MCU. It was like, this is what y'all asked for, and it's fantastic. And so it did make me realize, I was kind of with a lot of other people. It was like, we do need more of them, but what does that look like? And a lot of people I think also don't understand that it has to be like the right characters doing this too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to watch a rated R Jubilee movie. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm not doing that. It doesn't
make
any
sense.
To me. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. And so, but when it does make sense, let's do it. Why aren't we doing it when it makes sense? And so, yeah, I love that this is still like kind of a placeholder in comic book history. It did so much. It did lead to some of the great things we see now. We got Joker, you know what I'm saying? Like we're starting to get more rated R things. And so I really can't wait to continue to explore that and to continue to refer to Logan as like, y'all know Logan did this, right? You even just said a really good point. I can't wait to hammer home, because you're right. It did the character send off before we did get to Iron Man. You know what I'm saying? Like it did get there. And so I can't wait to continue to make arguments for it, because I think it is that important. And I know there are people who still don't recognize it as such yet, because we don't talk, to be honest, we still technically don't talk about Logan enough. You know what I mean? Like there's still moments where it's like, y'all remember Logan, right? Logan kind of happened, and as big as it is and big as it was, it needs to get brought up a little bit more. Same with the Wolverine that we were just talking about. It probably should get brought up a little bit more. So I can't wait to continue to be part of those conversations, man. But I love that it is such an important piece, I think, of comic book movie history.
I mean, hopefully when Deadpool and Wolverine comes out in a few weeks and just makes all the money in the world, people will go back and rewatch these movies and realize, like, oh, they've been doing this for like a while now. But yeah, I think, I referenced Blade earlier about the rated R element. I guess we should also acknowledge the Marvel Netflix series, what they were doing on the television
For
front
sure.
with Daredevil and
Hmm.
Jessica Jones,
Hmm.
so on and so forth. But those were, a bit of a smaller scale. You're talking about something that's going to be seen by a lot more people in theaters, going to make a lot
Hmm.
more money, and just be viewed by the masses. To do something on this level and to prove to be successful. This was the 1-2 punch alongside Deadpool that came out the year prior, broke all the records, made all the money for a rated R movie. It's like, oh wow, there is an audience for this. We don't have to be shy
Hmm.
and scared and fearful that an audience won't turn out, especially if it is for the right character, which it always has to be. But to do that in conjunction with being a send off and the end of an era and the end of a franchise, it just had so much going for it, and it was just flat out bottom line a really terrific movie that was a character
Hmm.
study and character motivated and driven, and it became Academy caliber. It became Oscar worthy work, and this was the first time that it's
Yeah.
happened. And it all of a sudden, it became a conversation where it's like, well, maybe the Academy is opening its eyes, and there isn't going to be as much of a bias. It certainly is still there, as you said. Some of these acting performances should absolutely be considered, but the fact
Okay.
that we're talking about the writing says a lot. The writing is like, I mean, you talk about writing and directing. That's what makes a movie at the end of the day. And the fact that this
Hmm.
even got nominated and was a part of the conversation, amazing stuff. And I don't even know if a comic book movie has been nominated since in the writing category. Like I don't believe Black Panther was nominated. I don't think
Yeah.
Joker was
Not the writing
nominated. Not
category.
writing like that.
Mm-mm.
That speaks volumes about the testaments of what Logan achieved at that time, and just how fondly I think people looked at it. It's truly an achievement, and as you said, we should be talking about it more. As we close out here, any final statements, any closing thoughts you want to make just about the character of Wolverine in this franchise, Hugh Jackman, what he's done, what he's brought to the world for all these years, how it might roll into Deadpool and Wolverine. But, I think even more importantly, just the effect that he's had on us as fans, us as viewers and audience members, growing up literally with him for the better part of our lives. It's kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
high key.
25
Yeah.
years is a long time. I haven't been on
Mhm.
Earth that much longer than that. So, what
Right.
do you want to just say in closing about what Hugh Jackman has done with this character for all these years?
Most importantly, just thank you. Thank you for, I think, in a lot of ways, holding the spirit of X-Men on your back. He has done that for so like I can't even imagine if Hugh Jackman wasn't as good as he is, where would X-Men be? Would we have even had the bridge to the Wolverine and X-Men Origins and in all the way into Logan? Would we have even have gotten that far? What does that look like? Having Wolverine be on such a big scale did so much. And it's funny because now, bro, we about to get a Wolverine video game from Insomniac. You know what I'm saying? Like, will we even have that without Hugh Jackman? I bet you that video game about to be Hugh Jackman all over that movie or over that game. We about to be like, yup,
Yeah.
that's Hugh Jackman Wolverine. And so, oh man, I just want to say thank you to Hugh Jackman, man, for a continued legacy for, again, for sure, one of the most beloved comic book characters of all time, man. He definitely helped shoot this thing into the moon, and to help continue the love for X-Men, like I was saying. But we just talked about X-Men 97 too. Like, man, that all of these movies over the years that he's been a part of and he has helped keep that interest up to get X-Men 97 greenlit. You know what I'm saying? Like, he helped probably make that bring that to fruition. So, man, I just have to say thank you to him, man. And I think, everything he did, all of that is going to lead into Deadpool and Wolverine. I can't wait to see him again. We don't know if it's going to be the last time, but we know it's going to be a good time. And I think that's really all that matters, man. So just happy, I think, to be a fan of Hugh Jackman and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, because that legacy is going to be everlasting and will continue to be everlasting, man. So just happy to be here as a fan.
Well said, and I really can't add on any more than that. Just such a true champion and such a beacon of light throughout the course of all of these movies, and he's just been such an incredibly talented actor to watch grow and develop all these years. And so I'm just really happy we got these movies. I'm happy that we have Hugh Jackman back. I'm happy that he's done all the work that he's done over the course of these years.